Hi everyone, my name is Antonio Leiva from antonioleiva.com, a place where I help other Android developers improve their Kotlin skills and boost their careers. And welcome to another episode of Droidkast.LIVE, the show where awesome Android engineers will come to tell us about their stories and how they found their place in the industry. And in the second part, our guests will show us a piece of their knowledge so that it can help us improve a little more in that area. As the name mentions, this is a live event, so you can use the chat to communicate with the rest of participants, and I'll try to introduce some of your questions during the show. Today, I have Joe Birch with me. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be here.
I was really looking forward to interviewing you because the more I know about you, the more I feel like we have a lot of things in common. We both love showing what we learn via articles, talks, courses. We are both vegan. We even had some same Christmas presents and even the same lamps in the living room. So this interview had to happen sooner or later. So you, for the ones who may not know about you, can you introduce yourself?
My name's Joe Birch. I'm an Android engineer and I work at a company called Buffer. I'm based in a city called Brighton in the UK. I say Brighton because it's easier, but I live in a little seaside town called Shoreham-by-Sea, but no one knows where that is. So, but I work remotely, so I'm always here. And as you said, I write a lot online, and I try and speak at conferences as often as I can as well, and just like to get around.
Nice, thank you. And tell us a little about your story. Where are you from? You already mentioned, but how was your childhood and what led you to start in software development?
Yeah, so I always had a big interest in computers. My dad used to make computers like in his spare time at home, so I was always trying to get involved in that. So I was always around technology and those kind of interests. But yeah, I studied coding or computing at college, which is like when you're like 16 to 18 years old, and I sucked at it. Like I just didn't get it. I don't know what it was. I enjoyed it, but just didn't click. And for that reason, I don't know, I didn't have the confidence that I'd go to uni and study that. So I wasn't going to go to university. I wasn't going to study anymore, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But then I thought I need to do something. So I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed I used to teach guitar when I was at school and stuff. And I like to think this teaching comes back to what I do now. Like I like sharing things and stuff.
Yeah, quite probably.
yeah. And so I thought, oh, maybe I can be a teacher. So instead of following my joy of technology, I decided to start a degree in teaching. And I had to retake every single A-level exam to get on the course because I wasn't going to go to uni. I didn't have the grades. But I started studying teaching and I really enjoyed it. But I was missing the technology stuff, even though I wasn't very good at it at college. Like I was missing it. So I dropped off, and I was lucky enough to be allowed to join computer science degree. And yeah, I joined, and it's weird because it just all made sense. Like I really sucked at college, but as soon as I started at university, I just got coding and I understood how it worked, and obviously there's some things I didn't get still, but I just managed to do it. And I don't know what it was. Like maybe it was just that. Maybe it's just having a break from things. Maybe having a break from a certain type of learning thing, and yeah, it just clicked, and that's how my coding stuff started. I studied at computer science for 3 years. I stayed on to do a master's as well, just because I really enjoyed university. So originally I wasn't going to go, and then they couldn't get rid of me. So yeah, I ended up staying there. I was there for 5 years in total, and it wasn't until the last year that I started Android. One of my lecturer's friends needed an app, and I hadn't even touched Android before. I used to have an iPhone, and God, it's all out there now. I just fell in love with the platform. Like I loved the flexibility, and I loved how open it was, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Like the app never got released, and it probably wasn't that good, but I learned a lot in the time that I was working on it, and from there, I just wanted to work on the Android platform.
Oh, that's nice. So that was like the pet project that helped you get into the Android career. From that you were able to find your first job as an Android developer, or how it was?
Yeah, Yeah, that was it. That was as soon as I did that, like it was great because it gave me like a little project for a portfolio, not a real portfolio, but like, oh, hey, I built this. So after that, I got a job in Brighton for a digital agency called Rebo. They did like kind of like they made apps for people, like an app shop kind of thing. We did design to development, and they did a lot of like R&D innovation stuff as well, which is kind of cool. So yeah, that was my first job, and I ended up staying there for like 3.5, 4 years almost, just because I enjoyed it, and it was great. Like working for an agency was a great way to work on loads of different projects and be involved in loads of different things and move quickly.
Yeah, that's true, because people usually think like they have like a very impression from product companies, but I think that agencies also have this part where you start a lot of projects in a small amount of time, so you can iterate over your, for instance, architecture is the thing that I can think about it more. You can iterate over your architecture and your knowledge about it, and it's really helpful to grow as a developer, to do a lot of smaller projects. And yeah, I think both things have their own pros and cons, and it's good to go for both worlds and learn from them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the architecture thing was definitely something we did. Like maybe like something new would, like I remember when MVP started being in the Android community, like becoming used more, and it was really easy for us to try that out because we were starting a new project at the time. So it's like, oh, this is a perfect time for us to use this, and like after we learned about it. And it was the same when like RxJava started becoming more popular. Like that was the same thing. Like being able to use that is easy for us because we were always starting new projects. So it's great. Like for a first, like even for your full-time job, like consistently, like is a great thing to be a part of. Just yeah, product companies, everyone has their side of what they prefer, I guess.
Yeah, of course. And how was your move from there to Buffer? There were any other steps, or just
that's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I think everyone, like I think people usually think I've been at other places, but yeah, it was straight from there straight to Buffer. So when I was at the agency, like I said, I enjoyed the work, but I felt like I was missing something. Like it was cool to work on stuff quickly and like work on loads of different projects, but I didn't really learn. I wasn't really learning from them. Like I wasn't getting like user feedback. I know some agencies do have like longer projects and they iterate on things, but because we were like a creative like innovation agency, like we kind of did a project and then went on to the next one, and then went to another one, and yeah, I was kind of missing that feedback loop, and I wanted to do more and like really be a part of something that like and watch it grow a long time, and that's I always knew about Buffer. And I saw they were hiring, so I was like, "That's it, I'm gone."
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the good part for working in a product company is that you probably get more involved in the project, because it's inevitable that if you know that the project is starting and ending at some given date, it's more difficult to feel that you are part of it. But when you work in something for a long period of time, like several years, I guess you've been in Buffer at least a couple of years or more.
Yeah, it's coming up to 3, I think. But
the thing is quite different.
Yeah, exactly that. You get a lot more like involved in it and a lot more like attached, but in a good way, because you know that it's not going anywhere unless you've got like multiple products and there's like internal products and stuff. But it's the same thing. Like you have like a stronger connection with them because they're sticking around and that's what you're working on day to day.
How do you feel about working from home?
I love it. Like at first I was unsure. I was like, am I going to like this? Am I going to find it weird? But like, yeah, it's amazing. I can't imagine going back to an office. Like the flexibility, just being able to like have my day how I want it. And we've got a dog now, so it's nice being around the dog. I go for a walk at lunch, go to the gym sometimes at lunchtime, and yeah, it's great. Like I get so much more done than I did in an office. Just get so much heads down time. It's great. And for conferences, it's perfect because like it means I can work, like I can go somewhere for a week and work from there for the week if I want to. And it's just nice to have that flexibility.
In fact, now that I remember, you had a podcast with David Gonzalez about remote working. I don't know if it's discontinued or not because.
Oh God, yeah, no, it's still going. We're just a bit. I think we're both quite busy people, so it's like it's hard for us to both like align and then get someone else to align at the same time that we're free. And we've got 2 more episodes recorded, so the next one's coming out in like a week and a half, and then yeah.
That's right.
We're trying.
I'll put it in the notes, so if everyone wants to join, they can find it.
That'd be great.
And regarding about being busy, I still don't understand how do you manage to find time to do all the things you do. 56 blog posts last year, 12 talks, 8 open source projects, GDA, work on renovating your new house. How do you do all that?
I do sleep. So I put that out there. I don't know, like I often get asked that, and I guess like I find so I do work, like I take like a long lunch break and stuff, and I do some of my own things in the morning and sometimes in the evening, but I do have downtime. Like I do find time to switch off as well. Like I read or I watch TV. I'm not constantly on my laptop. I know I might seem that way, but I just have I have a lot on the go at a time. So like if sometimes like my medium drafts section is, I've got like 40 drafts in there. Like there's just, I've always got stuff that I'm wanting to write about. Or I start one thing and I go on to the next thing. Like I'm quite bad with like focusing on one thing. That's why the guitar project I recently launched like took me so long, because I was doing other things at the same time. So, but yeah, I've got I have a lot on the go at one time. So it's always something that's maybe almost finished. So that's how I'm able to like put things out quite often. But yeah, I don't know. Like I just find when I get started, I just get in a zone, and I find it really easy to be productive. Especially if it's something that's new or something I've just played with, like I'm really excited about it. So I just do it. And if people read my stuff, they've probably seen typos. So like I kind of just do stuff and put it out. Like I never really do like too much proofreading and stuff. So that's probably another reason why they go out so quickly. But so apologies if you're one of those people who've had to put up with my spelling errors.
I'm sure nobody will complain about it. That's great. And you mentioned the guitar project. If you want to talk a little more about it, because I found it exciting when I knew about it. So, well, first I started with seeing your stories on Instagram. I didn't really know exactly what you were doing, but when you released it the other day, it's kind of crazy and amazing. So you want to tell a little more about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was just to say, it was the same. I had a bunch of friends messaging me like, "What on earth are you doing?" like, just wait. Yeah, so it's a guitar, and essentially it's designed for people who are blind, deaf, or mute. It has the Google Assistant built into it. So the aim of the guitar is to be able to learn chords. It's not like a complete guitar tutor. It's kind of like, here's how you get started, like teach you the basics. And once you've got the chords down, you can kind of, build on that yourself. So it has a Google Assistant, so you can speak to it. You can request, you can say, oh, tell me how to play the C chord. And then it's got a speaker built in, so it will hit the actions on Google API and come back with the response. And if you've got the speaker turned on, it will tell you how to play the chord. It will say like, oh, E string fret 1, B string fret 2, and so on. So they're clear instructions. And the guitar has the frets are already quite accessible because they got the inlays, so you can already feel the numbers, which is quite handy. It's also got a Braille reader, so it will read out the response in Braille, and that was a fun bit to build. And it also has an LCD screen, so it will show you a little chord diagram as well. And it also has like a navigational, like a little navigational part where you can select what chords. So on another screen, it will say all the different chords that are available, and you can use these buttons to like flick through them and select them as well. So yeah, and that's it really in a nutshell. But yeah, I put it out the other day, and there's information on my Twitter and a video. It's probably makes it easier to watch the video because it's quite a lot to explain. But
Yeah.
it was cool. It was a cool thing to build.
Really awesome. Yeah, I loved it when I saw it.
Thank you.
That's great. And it sounds like really, yeah, maybe that's why you've been 6 months doing it, because it looks quite complex to do. Mix all the things together and all that. It was
a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And all those cables and all that going together.
Yeah, like when I was trying to put them inside the guitar, because I didn't want to drill a flap in the guitar, so I was trying to fit it in the sound hole. And whenever I put one thing in, another thing would come unplugged, and it was a nightmare. But it's in there now, and hopefully it remains that way.
That's great. I'll also leave it in the notes so that everyone that is interested in it can take a look, because at least the video is really great to see.
Cool, thank you.
So, no problem at all. And of all of these things that you spend your time on, was the most you enjoy, the one you enjoy the most, if there's any of?
Wow. I think it's public speaking. That's probably my favorite out of, if we're talking about those kind of like community activities, I think it's public speaking. I don't know, I just get I get a real buzz out of it. Like I still get nervous when I go to speak, but just being on stage and like seeing people like really engaged, and then having people come up to you afterwards and like either thank you or like ask further questions, and seeing that people have like learned something from that, and you've really given them that like intimate experience, it's just a really cool thing. And yeah, I love it. I love being at conferences as well, and like being around all those people and seeing other people's talks. So public speaking is a great way to sort of be in that environment. But yeah, I think that's probably my favorite. Yeah, it's such a rewarding thing.
It's really cool. Yeah. Even if it's quite scary at the beginning, I encourage everyone to try it, at least in closer circles, maybe in the company you're working on some local media, some local events or something like that. But it's a very nice experience that I recommend to everyone. And what we always mention, that you learn a lot more when you have to teach someone. So it's a really awesome way to master a topic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the way you do it. Like if you're learning something or there's something you want to learn, then submit a talk on it, and you have no choice but to learn it. But
exactly.
I had Facebook remind me the other day of my first talk. I think it was like 3 and a bit years ago, and I looked at the picture, and I was holding those cards. You hold cards, and you sometimes do things and you flick through them. And I had those, and I was just thinking, oh my God, like, why did I do that? But yeah, anything to get you started, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that I'm more interested in than the rest of audience about it. But anyway, I know that you have a very special connection with animals. You're vegan. You're volunteering in a sanctuary for these efforts. I know that you go to closer beach to clean up the place and all that. So this is quite far from what I see from my day-to-day, sadly. And where did you all this need to help other living beings come from? What's the thing that made you switch your mind, or that point that make you change?
Yeah, that's a good one. So yeah, before I was vegan, I was vegetarian, and I was pretty vegetarian for like half a year before changing. And yeah, I went veggie at first because I started learning more about what happens on like farms and stuff, and I was like, oh, I want to be vegetarian. I don't want to eat meat, like, because I don't want to have animals go through that. And yeah, and that was it. And then I was vegetarian for a bit, and then I started getting more curious. Like I knew obviously animals are killed for meat and stuff, and then I started getting more curious, and I got kind of a bit obsessed with like researching it, like reading things, watching videos, and I started to learn more about like the dairy industry, and and learning how bad that is. And I was like horrified. I was like, what? Like, I've been vegetarian, and I thought myself I was doing like the right thing. And yeah, so I went vegan for that reason, just because, I didn't like what I saw. And yeah, I've just, and from that, like, I don't know if you've heard of like the term like speciesism. Like I've become really like a strong believer of that, and try and incorporate it into like everything I do, like everything I buy or wherever I go, like just to try and make sure that I'm not being involved in something that sort of brings down the equality scale there. And that's the same reason why, like, I volunteer at the sanctuary, and same reason why I help out at Sea Shepherds. Sea Shepherds is a bit different because it's not like Sea Shepherds aren't like, you have to be vegan to be here. It's not that kind of thing, but like they really try and like to help the environment, and the work they do is helping everyone. It's not just like it's not like a vegan thing. It's like it's an environment thing, which is, I guess, goes around in full circle.
Nice. Yeah. I totally agree on that. I don't want to dive deeper on this topic because it's a little bit away from the rest, and I know it's a little complicated topic, but yeah, I agree with all that. And for the ones that are interested, you know that, and are listening to us, you know that you can always contact us, and we can provide you with more information about it if you want to know more about it. So
yeah, totally.
And so when moving to the end of this first part of the interview, when you think about your long-term future, how do you see it? Do you think you'll continue with software development for the rest of your career, or I know it's a bit difficult with this changing world, but how you envision yourself?
Yeah, I'd like to, like, I'd like to continue what I'm doing for however long. Like, I mean, I think I've always wondered, because I've seen people move from like a development role to like a management role or like a lead role. And personally, I don't think I'll move into management. Obviously, I never know what's going to happen, but like I can't see myself doing that. Like, I really love being involved in the projects, like in terms of like a coding level. And like really like being involved in that building phase. So I can't see myself moving out of that. Whether I'm doing the same thing, whether I'm working on the same thing now, I think is a different story. Because like I wish I could work on mobile development forever. Like I love making mobile apps, but like you said, like we don't know what's going to happen. Like mobile things are moving so quickly. Like who knows what we'll be doing in 5 years time or 10 years time. Like maybe I'll be working on conversational tools or something. But I think it'll still be under the same umbrella. Like, still working on code and building products, building things for users. I think I'll still be doing that.
That's an idea. And luckily now developers are, because before the management position was like the important one, and developers were like just a necessary tool, but nothing important. And now that importance is growing, and we developers are a very visible and important part of the company. So I think we can continue our careers being developers for a long time without worrying about our career progress or things like that. So that's great.
Yeah, I think that's a lot more like compared to maybe things I've heard of other people or more my previous job. Like definitely have a lot more voice as developers now in the companies. Like at Buffer, for example, we have a lot of voice as developers and a lot of like communication between different teams and different management roles. So yeah, it's like what you said there. It's the same thing. Whereas other companies or friends I've heard slightly different, where you don't have that same kind of level of communication, which isn't good for your growth, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and finally, if you had to recommend just one thing to our listeners about anything IT related or not, what would be? It's pretty general, but I leave you the space to.
Yeah. I think my usual go-to for this is like get. I don't know. I'm not trying to think of like an inspirational one-liner, but it's just get stuck in. Like one of the things that held me back from like speaking or writing was I always used to be really scared of what other people would think. And like when I was at my last job, it was probably for like a year and a half. I was really writing things down internally or like working on private open source, like internal projects that weren't open sourced. And I was like, people might judge, like people might say this is rubbish, or people might pick me apart for this. And yeah, I think I lost a lot of time, and I probably lost growth opportunities there because I was scared of what people would think. But like I sort of grew to learn that everyone's friendly online. Like not everyone, but like most people online are friendly. Most people are there to help you, and most people are probably at the same level as you are, like that within your circle, if not most, and a lot of people. And yeah, and that's my advice: is don't be worried or scared about putting stuff out or writing blog posts. Like, you know, even if it's been done before, yeah, just go for it. And I think that's one of my things I wish I wasn't scared of like back in the day, but we're definitely something I'd say to other people.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. And another thing I usually like to mention too is that probably that scare never disappears. You always have like that little voice telling you things from time to time. But in the end, you learn to live with it and kind of ignore it and do what you feel that it's good and go on. And yeah, that's where I usually try to have in my mind when I want to release something, maybe a blog post or whatever, so that fear doesn't stop me from doing things that I really want to do. So,
no, definitely.
Nice. So, thank you very much for this first part, and now I think you're going to talk us about modularizing Android projects. So, do you want to start?
Cool. Good stuff. I just share my screen. Cool. A bit of inception. That's all good.
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah, bear with me because I've got the two screens now. So yeah. So yeah, I get started. Yeah, modularizing Android applications. So yeah, the kind of aim is this is just to sort of introduce the concept of modularization, look a bit over the different kinds of modularization approaches we can take. Not going to dive too deep into each one because I kind of want to keep it high level and accessible to everyone. So yeah. With that in mind, I guess a good place to start is what is modularization? Some people might not be familiar with it. It might be a completely new concept. So modularization is essentially the process of, or the practice of splitting up an application or an Android project or any kind of project into separate modules, individual modules, whether those modules are dependent on each other or whether they work independently. That doesn't really matter as long as those parts of the project are in their own separated modules. That is modularization. One way we can think of that is like a jigsaw puzzle. So we have our jigsaw puzzle. Maybe it's a 8-piece puzzle. Maybe it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. Although I feel for you if you've got that big of a puzzle. Then we can see our Android project as all these puzzle pieces, and each of those puzzle pieces is a module, and all of those modules fit together to create the entire picture, which is our application. We can pull those pieces out and we'll have these separate modules, whether they're fine on their own or whether they depend on another one. We can pull them apart, put them back together, and that represents our application. And yeah, you know, why? But why would we want to do that? Why would we want to split our Android application up into modules? There's a bunch of reasons why, and I think all of these, obviously, there's probably some disadvantages as well. But to begin with, there are many advantages that come to modularizing our applications. The first one, I think, is the most important thing, is decoupling code. So when you've got a modularized project, because of the way dependencies work, we often have often be restricted to the classes we can access. So for example, say if I have an application module and then like a feature module, depending on the dependency direction, that feature module is going to have the classes inside of that module, and the other module won't be able to access them. And the way that the communication happens between those two modules will be restrictive to what's in each module. So because we've got these modules in place, it helps us to write code that is more reliant on what's inside that module, rather than hopping between classes that are all in the same place. So for example, again, if we have a single module like we do in a lot of our Android applications, which is the app module, we have access to so many classes. We can, unless you package things and use like, privacy statements and like have things marked as private and protected and so on, we can often access loads of different classes from all over the place. And that can, maybe you're working on a project and deadlines are coming in and you think, oh, I'll just access this from here because I need to get this done. And then you do that time and time again. We've all been there. Do that time and time again. And then you end up with this place where classes become so dependent on each other. Whereas, say if that feature was in a module to begin with, you can't have those communications in place because that relationship just isn't there. So having that module in place helps us to create something that isn't so tightly coupled to another concept. And with that in mind, it helps us to create a clear separation of responsibilities. So we have, say we have our one module and we have two feature modules. So each feature module would have, maybe we have like a composer and a payments module. Those modules are clearly just responsible for those things. So if we're going to modify our project and we're going to add something to do with payments, it's not going to go in our base module. It's going to go in that payments module. We know exactly where it goes, which means that when we come to work on that again, or if there's a bug, that responsibility we know is contained within a side of that module. This makes our project easier to manage. So like I said, maybe we're fixing a bug. Maybe we're trying to just change something and we want to find where that class is. Or maybe we're going to add a new feature or change how something works. We know exactly where that is going to be because we've got that clear organization of modularization. So again, if we're going to do something to do with payments, it's going to be within inside of that module. And we know it's going to be there because our project has been modularized. We also have better ownership over features and areas. So I know some companies that have huge applications and maybe they'll have, I don't know, 20 to 25 different feature modules. And each of those modules will be just a different part of their app. So maybe they'll have a billing module, maybe they have an accounts module, maybe they'll have a composer module or a timeline module. And each of those modules could be huge and they're all doing a single thing. And often at these big companies, you'll have people just working, you have teams just working on one of those modules. And this gives, obviously, in bigger companies, you'll still have knowledge silos, but in bigger companies, that's often how they work. But this gives you more ownership over those features and areas. And for example, you're going to have less crossover, less code conflicts, because each team is solely just working on their module responsibility. And that means your development workflows could often be a lot smoother. There's also some newer features of newer versions of Gradle. I think it's like as of Gradle 3 maybe, or 3.1. I'm not sure exactly, but it gives you faster build times. And I think the way it works is that when you make a change in a module, Gradle will only rebuild the module that's been changed. So say if you have 10 modules and you only make changes in 1 or 2 of them, then only those 1 or 2 modules will be rebuilt when you're rebuilding your project, which means the other 8, obviously, cached versions are just going to be used and they don't need to be rebuilt, which means your entire build is going to be quicker, which is already a great advantage. If you've got a lot of modules, like going back to the example of the 25 module company, then that is a big improvement you can have there. And another thing is app bundles and dynamic delivery. So if you're using modularization, this is solely mainly for dynamic feature modules, but whether you're using those or not, you're one step closer to using app bundles and dynamic delivery, which is a new, if you're not aware of that, that's a new Google Play feature from the Google team, which I think is a huge improvement on the way that our applications are going to be delivered. And whilst I think it's still catching on, and I think there's still some things that people are trying to work out there, I think it's going to be, going to eventually be a standard of the way that our applications are delivered. And even if you're just using library modules for your features, it's still a step closer to being able to put app bundles in place, rather than not having modules in place to begin with. So with that said, I just want to run through the different types of modules that we might have when it comes to an Android project. So we'll start here. This is likely already a module you've already encountered. If you've been inside of an Android project before, or you've created an Android project, you'll probably remember the app module. So if not, it's an important place to start if you're new here. But this is essentially the main module of your application, often called the app module, and it makes use of the application plugin in your build.gradle file, which is the android.application plugin declaration. Now, if you're building a single module application, then this is likely going to be the only module that will be using throughout your project. This base module will contain all of your application's responsibilities. So the user interface, the networking stuff, the cache, the data operations, anything you can think of to do with your application, it will be in there. Now, if you're building a multi-module application, then the application module will still be the installed module, but the way that this application module operates might vary depending on what it is your modularization is made up of. So if your multi-module project simply abstracts out data responsibilities of your application into library modules, then your application module will operate in exactly the same way that it worked within a single module application. There'll just be a clearer separation of concerns. The installed version of your application won't be any different than it was before. Now, if your multi-module project is supporting dynamic features, for example, then this application module will behave in pretty much the same way as a single module application. But the only difference here is that the module will need to define any of the dynamic feature module references within its build.gradle file. Other than that, the app module won't know any different than what it was before. If your multi-module project supports instant apps, then this module will be simply used to define the feature module dependencies for the instant app. This is because when the instant app is built, this application module does not contain any application code, as its responsibility is just to consume the instant app. So that's the only time that the app module may be different from others. So yeah, that's enough about that one. Like I said, most people are probably familiar with that already, but if you're not, then yeah, it's worth creating a new project and checking it out. So the next type is the Android library modules. Again, this is quite a common plugin type that a lot of people probably would have used already. But let's call these core modules, because although they're called Android library projects, it can often make you think, oh, they're just going to be created for Android libraries that such as widgets and stuff. But Android libraries can be anything. They can be whether they're a custom view, whether it's something to abstract out a library, or whether it's something to contain some form of like business logic or data logic in your app. And this essentially can let you use these modules to decouple code from the main module of your project. And there's not really an official term for these other than library modules, but we're going to call them core modules just so it's a bit more high level and abstracted. So for example, let's say you have a project that supports Android Wear, Android TV, and Android phones. You might have a separate module for the Wear UI. You might have a separate module for the phone UI. You might have another module for the TV UI, and then another module which is called the core module. And this core module would contain all your data operations, business logic, the cache, the networking stuff. And then each of the other modules will contain everything that is to do with that separate presentation method. So the TV module would just contain the user interface of the TV, and that will make use of the core module to do all the networking operations and retrieve the data. And then each of those other UI platform modules will do the same thing. So we're using the core module there to contain shared business logic and shared data operations to our UI modules, so we only have to define that code once. And that's promoting code reuse because we're sharing everything between these different modules. And reuse isn't the only reason why you might want to create this kind of module. Separating clear logic core logic also helps give us the advantages that I mentioned before. So we have that clear separation of concerns, which makes our code easier to understand, and also makes our code easier to test because things are more fine-grained, and also makes it easier to maintain. And again, we're going to see some improvements from our build times because we're not going to have to make a change in every single module when we have any updates. So for example, you may have a large application with a complex data layer that communicates with both a remote and a cache source. And in cases like this, separating out these parts into their own responsibility-specific modules helps you to achieve these similar advantages. This would result in something looking like this, where we have a data module that handles, where we fetch the data from. Again, it's not aware of where the data is coming from. It's just aware of the operations around it. And then we have a remote module, which handles the networking stuff. We have a cache module that handles the hitting of our database. And that data module just uses those two to fetch the required data. And now these are just examples. There are no strict guidelines as to what should be inside of these Android library modules. My advice would be not to just move stuff out into these for the sake of it, but if you feel that will be some benefit to your project, like maybe just to make things easier to manage or any of the other advantages I mentioned above, then moving a responsibility into a module can help you to achieve some of these things. So yeah, you can either use an Android library plugin, or even if you're maybe you're making a module that isn't referencing the Android framework. Because if you're not making use of the Android framework, then you can just use a Kotlin plugin. So this is just apply plugin Kotlin, different to what we've defined here, because if we're not making use of the Android framework, there's no need to apply it to the module itself because it's not going to be used. And this will also help you with build times and so on. We also have another type of approach that we can use library modules for. So whilst core modules can often be used to move chunks of shared logic or independent responsibilities, we may sometimes want to abstract third-party responsibilities outside of our application. So this can often be a good idea because we might not want to tightly couple our application to a specific implementation. So for example, maybe we make use of, I don't know, Realm, the database library inside our project. If we have Realm scattered all the way through our app module using loads of different places, if Realm was to, stop supporting Android in a few years, when we got to that time and they said, yep, we're not supporting Android anymore, we'd have this Realm code tightly coupled all the way through our application, and removing that could be a bit of a pain. I probably should have used Parse as an example, because Parse shut down a couple of years ago, I think it was, and I think there was a lot of applications, a lot of startups who made use of Parse in their projects. And if that was the case with that, and that was tightly coupled through your app, it's the same thing. Removing that could have been a big task and could have been quite tricky. So what we can do here is we can make use of Android library module and abstract these dependencies out into their own modules. And in this situation, we'd simply communicate via an interface between the app and that abstraction module. And therefore, if some library does become deprecated, maybe a server shuts down or so on, we don't need to touch our app module code, because our app module knows nothing about what database provider we're using. It just knows we're using some form of database or some form of external storage. All we'd have to do is update what's used in the database layer, and that interface probably won't change. So our application code, in a lot of cases, won't need to be touched at all. Yeah, and this is something that I'm quite a strong believer of, because this is something we do at Buffer as well, is to shift things out into abstraction modules, because, yeah, like I said, things are always changing, and you don't want to have to be in that position where your code base is tightly coupled to a specific provider. Yeah, cool. So what am I doing? Cool, yeah. The next one is, so feature modules. As well as approach of splitting out backend modules and like libraries into their own things, you can also do the same for features within your apps. So these feature modules are only going to contain specific features for app, and it'll help us achieve the same benefits that we've previously looked at. The way that these are defined will really depend on the kind of multi-module application you've got. So yeah, there's a couple of different scenarios. So in a standard application, so by standard, I mean an app that's not using instant apps or an app that's not using dynamic delivery, you may still want to split out module features into their own modules. Just because there's a new publishing format out, it doesn't mean you have to use it. Using library modules for your features is perfectly fine for now. So this also it gives you the benefits, like I said, and it also helps you future-proof in a sense. So if you've got features inside of library modules, shifting to app modules in the future, already half the work is done. So you're already a step closer to being able to support that. So what this is essentially, say we've got our app, we'd take our features, maybe it's account, payments, composer, we'd stick them into modules, and our application class, our application module, will reference those modules and make use of their classes inside of them. So it's important to note the dependency direction here. So our app module knows about our library modules. So our app module can access those classes, but our library module knows nothing about the app module. So the library module is dependent on itself, and it can't reference any of the classes by the module that's being used by. Now, in the cases where you're not supporting instant apps, or you're not ready or need to support dynamic delivery yet, feature library modules will really help you to decouple your code base, and you also get the other benefits of modularization. So yeah. Other than that, there's also an instant support application module. So if your app is going to support Play Instant, then you need to make use of plugins. That's the com.android.feature plugin. Now, this isn't a dynamic feature module. It's a module that is used by instant apps that contains some form of feature. So each feature module will need to have a reference to your base module. The feature module in this case will contain the required code for the implementation of that feature, which is going to be available in an instant format. And code that is required from the core of your app will be obtained from some base module. So you'll have like some core module that's available to all of them. So yeah, I don't want to go too much into instant apps, but yeah, that's that one that's available. Now we also have the shiny new dynamic feature modules which are available, which are, like I said, I'm really excited about these, and I think they're a really cool thing to start shifting towards if you can. So these kind of modules can be used to decouple specific features and resources of your application into their own individual modules. So this can be used as part of the new app bundle format, and we can also make use of it to dynamically deliver these features to our users. So if we have a feature that maybe not everyone's going to make use of it, and we don't want to bundle it with our APK, we can make it available as an independent feature, and our user can download it to their app when it's required. So yeah, like I said, if it's a feature not everyone's going to use, that could be big in size that you might want to give to everyone, this is a perfect use case of that. So yeah, just like the instant app focused feature module, these dynamic feature modules will just contain the code for the feature that they're defining. So we'll go on to these more in a bit, but another thing I'd like to point out is the dependency direction. So we looked at before, we'll go back 2 slides. So whilst we were previously talking about features in library modules, you notice the dependency direction is the app depends on the library module. The difference with dynamic features is, although those are still features, they're still, the code could be almost the same as the library modules. The only difference is the dependency direction. So in our apps build at Gradle file, we state the names of the modules which are dynamic features, but we don't add them as dependencies. So that means our app module cannot access the code inside of that feature module. However, our feature module does have the app module as a dependency. So our application code is available to those feature modules. So this does change things quite a bit. So whilst I said having stuff in library modules can, make you a step closer to dynamic feature support, it's not a simple switch of, we can automatically enable this. If you're thinking of doing it that way, then it's important to try and make sure you get your dependencies intact there. And yeah, so that's Oh yeah, that's the second to last one. So the last one is just don't want to go too much onto instant apps, but the last one that if you come across it is called an instant app module, and this is using the plugin of com.android.instant app. And if we're wanting to support instant apps, then our application would need to provide one of these modules. And there's nothing really much to say about this because the contents of this module will be pretty much empty. And this is the responsibility of this module is to simply build the instant app when it was requested. So its sole purpose is to consume the feature modules that we state it to be used, because it's referenced as a dependency. And that's kind of it. That module is basically saying, hey, these are the features that need to be provided on an instant install, and it provides them. It's not the installable APK as such. So with that said, that's the first part. That's all of the module types that are available. And as you can see, there's a couple of options available when it comes to modularization, and each one has their own own responsibility. Like I said, just want to iterate back onto the library modules again, because I think they're a really powerful thing. If we can use them, if you make use of them properly, it can really help to improve your code base and get you that step closer to dynamic feature support. The first thing I want to look at now is modularizing by layer, because I mentioned a lot feature modularization. We can also modularize our applications by layer. This is how I've done this before, and I'm slowly personally I favor feature modularization, but it really does depend on the project that you're working on, and it really depends on your team and their decisions. So modularizing, saying that word too much now. So modularizing by layer is essentially splitting out your application into modules based off of the different layers that are there. So to better put that into a visual representation, is like if you're familiar with clean architecture or other diagrams, you may have seen this kind of thing before. But if you picture your project and try and imagine it as all the different layers that make it up. So a good way to picture this is maybe an onion. I know that's quite a often used a reference. But if you imagine all the different layers of an onion, and then think of your project and how that splits up across. So looking at this circular diagram, we have all the different colors of circles that go outwards. You have the innermost layer that could be I don't know, a domain layer. Then on the next layer we could have things such as like our use case classes, and the layer outside of that we could have our data classes like our remote, our cache, our data operations, and the layer outside of that we could have our user interface, and then we could go even further and have an extra one that is external third-party sources. So we can see we start here with the most primitive data class type of our use cases, or have our business logic, and we move outwards, eventually going layer by layer to our most user-facing point, which is the user interface. And it's perfectly fine to modularize your applications like that if that's what you feel your project will benefit from. So for example, we may have just two modules in our app. We may have a user interface module, and we may have a data module. That data module will contain things like data classes, maybe a remote class. And our UI module will simply reference that data module and make use of the classes that are defined in it. Whilst at first you may think, what's the point in that? Like, hopefully some of the benefits I mentioned before might come to mind. That data module is now completely separated. All the responsibility of our data operations in our app are separated out into its own module. We have the faster build times. We have a clear separation of concerns. And also it makes it reusable. So for example, if we were to add, if that UI module there was to become the phone UI module and we added a TV UI module, then we'd easily be able to just reuse what's in our data module. Or if we were to make another app and it was using the same APIs in our project as this one, and we could reuse that data module across our projects and so on. Maybe you want to go one step further and you want to split things out even more. Could easily add a domain module which contains things like use case classes and business logic, and that then communicates with a data module. Modularizing by layer, or any kinds of modularizer, or any kind of modularizing, there's no restrictions. It's all just guidelines on what works for you. And then going even one step further, we could have we can split out our data sources into their own modules. Something we have is a cache and remote module that allows us to split out these things into their own modules and have those dependencies really separated. So a great point this really shown was when we switched to Room, in previously using raw SQL databases, and we decided to start moving to Room. And it was really easy to do because that code was clearly separated out of our project. It didn't interfere with any other changes that anyone else was making. So it was really nice to be able to work on that in its own little bubble. And that's just obviously one of the benefits that is seen there. As I mentioned before, modularizing by layer, there's many ways, many shapes and forms it can take place, whether you're modularizing data classes or UI classes. One thing that I've done before on a project I work on, a personal project I worked on years ago, was I made an app for TV, mobile, and Wear. And I had 3 modules that literally just contained the activities and fragments specific to that platform. So I had the lean back library in the TV module, had the Android activities in the mobile module, and they had I can't remember what the stuff is used on Wear. I haven't worked on Wear in so long, but it's basically the equivalent of activities and fragments for Wear in that Wear module. And they all reference the core module, and that core module contained everything to do with the API, everything to do with the cache, everything to do with anything else that was UI stuff, and that wasn't UI stuff was inside that core module. And those 3 modules just reused what was in there. They all made use of the same class. And if I then made an Android Auto UI module, then it would have been the same thing. I would just add a dependency and make use of what was there. And those are the core module is just a library module that I could just easily make use of. And whether you're modularized by layer or feature, you can also split out your tests into the own modules if you want. I know this was quite a common thing that was used to, I don't know if people are still doing this in their projects, but you can easily switch out your tests into their own dependent modules as well if you want to. It was something that I did at the time for this project, just to try it out. And it works well. It helps to keep things tidy and things clean. And this was what the project looked like at the time. It was a simple dribble client. It wasn't like Plaid. It wasn't as good as that, but it was just an example. I think it was like 4.5 years ago I started it, and it was modularization was, people were using it, but it wasn't, not many people were writing about it and stuff, and there wasn't really any how-to guides. So I built this app. It's on my GitHub, github.com/highlojo. The code is probably really bad. I think it is really bad. And I haven't looked at the code in a while. But for example's sake of a modularized application and reuse, it might provide useful. It's called Bourbon, Bourbon. And it basically reuses this core module across each of the different UI states. And yeah, it's worth looking at if you want to see an example of a modularized by layer application that isn't too complicated. It might be worth checking out. And when it comes to packaging inside these, that's also an important factor of how your project is structured. So inside of that module, you then have, say we have a data module and a UI module, we can then package by feature inside of those. Because we've already modularized by layer, so we can't package by layer either, because it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't really work. We wouldn't have much of a package structure. So packaging by feature inside of each of those modules will again help our project be more easy to maintain and sort of navigate as well. So inside of that, just package by feature, and yeah, each of those features will be packaged the same inside each of the modules. So hopping between the modules becomes really simple to do. And going on to the other kind of modularization is modularizing by feature, which is personally my preferred way of doing things. But again, it depends on the application and it depends on how you like to do things. It's not a be all and end all, whatever one you use. It's whatever works for you and your project. My laptop's slipping. So modularizing by feature is a little bit different. So modularized by feature means that so we're not modularized by layer anymore. So when we modularize by layer, we split things out into layer responsibilities such as data, cache, remote, and UI, and so on. That's not the case. This is a completely different approach. So we'd still have our base module, and And then we have our Android library modules, which will contain each of the features. So we'd have our base module, and then we'd have a composer module, maybe we'll have a feed module, and so on. And each of those modules will just contain the code that is defined for that feature. And then inside of that would make sense to then package by layer, because we've already modularized by feature, so we can't package by feature because we've already got our features defined. So then in each of those features, we then have the code that is used for that feature, whether it's the data stuff, whether it's the presentation, and also the dependency injection stuff that is specific to that feature. So as you can see, it is a bit of a flip side. It's quite different from going from one to the other, but hopefully you can see how each of those is made up. So like I said, personally, modularizing by feature is a cool thing to do, but yeah, it depends what works for your project. And modularizing by feature is, even if you're using, like I said, these library modules here, even these Android library modules, you're still on the road to app bundle support. Not saying you have to do right away, but it helps you get there and helps to keep your project in a good shape. So whilst we're here on the topic of feature modularization is app bundles, just want to brush over these quickly. So app bundles is like what I said before about the dynamic feature modules. So we're still modularizing by feature, but we're not using the Android library Gradle plugin anymore. We're using the dynamic feature plugin. This is because app bundles need to make use of those dynamic features to be able to support it. So one thing, if you haven't noticed already, is the dependency direction. That is the key thing, the key difference when it comes to modularization with app bundles. So going back to here, you can see our base module knows about our feature modules because they're Android library projects, but our feature modules, our library projects, know nothing about the base module. So that is a key difference here, because here our feature modules know about our base module. So that means we can access the classes if we need to, we can access our application class, but our base module can't access any of the classes from these feature modules. So it is a bit of a flip side, and it is a different approach. Like, you have to make sure that your dependencies are configured correctly within your project, and they are not required any classes that you can't access. But like I said, if you've already got library projects, it's not too hard to then switch that out. So app bundles, they're not supported out the box. Like I said, you need to support dynamic feature modules. And another thing I'm not going to talk about too much here is Google Play app signing. If you're still signing your own APKs, then to be able to use app bundles, you have to enroll in Google Play app signing. If you're not familiar with that, that's the process of where Google Play essentially signs your APKs for you. All you need to do is enroll. You generate a key from your side, and that is like an upload key. And that just allows you to upload the APK and stuff, but the actual signing of the APK takes place by Google Play themselves. And the whole reason for that is because, again, not going too much into app bundles, but when you distribute app bundles, Google Play needs to sign it for you because it generates the APKs. So app bundles will make APKs specific for a user. So if your app has language resources for 20 different languages, and that user's device is only making use of one language, then it will generate an APK that only uses the resources for that locale, and which saves your APK from having stuff that isn't needed and it being too big in size. And then we also have things like resources from like different DPI, different screen densities and stuff, and animations and other stuff like that. So Google Play will generate an APK that's specific for that device. And then app bundles as well for dynamic delivery will also make those downloads available and make sure things are built properly for you to distribute that. And yeah, when it comes to app bundles as well, the only other thing you need to do is you have an X in your XML file, your manifest, you will have the distribution declaration. So this essentially defines how your module operates when it comes to app bundles. You could define whether it's an instant bundle or not, whether it's available on demand. So on demand is like the most important thing here is, do you want your app bundle to be installed with the app, or should it be available when the user requests it at the point of the feature is acquired? So you can still make use of app bundles and have them installed with the app. Like app bundles aren't just for features that you want to download at any time. It's completely up to you whether you want them to be dynamic or not. And you can define a title, like if that's a user-facing thing. If it's not an on-demand module, then you probably don't need a title. And then the last point is fusing. I can't remember exactly. I think it's when the device is like 4.4 or 4. I have to check that. It's automatically included and not available for download, because app bundles are only supported by that version and above. So yeah, if your APK is if your app's supporting those kind of Android versions, then these app bundles will just be installed on those devices by default. But yeah, just to go over a few last points so library feature modules versus dynamic feature modules. It's important to understand the difference here. The first thing is the direction of dependency. Like I said, in a non-app bundle situation, the app module knows about the feature modules. So it can access those classes, it can start the activities in those classes, it can use the widgets in those classes if it needs to, or use whatever. And on the other hand, when we come to dynamic feature modules, our dynamic feature modules know about the application class, which is great. When it comes to starting those activities and stuff, we have to do things a bit differently, and it will also affect other things, which will come on to different in a bit. So yeah, that's that. Important to remember these directions of relationships, just so you know that what's available to your classes at that time and what isn't. Also, distribution effects are different. If you're using library modules, you don't get any of the benefits of app bundles, dynamic delivery. You don't get any of the resource shrinking and removals and so on. You don't get any of that. But you do still get the modularization benefits that I spoke about, such as faster build times and so on. So any shift towards modularization, you're going to see benefits. It's better than nothing as such. But again, not something you should just do for the sake of it. So yeah, our library module is shipped as a one complete APK in one app. And our dynamic feature gives us the ability to split things out independently as they are required to our users. And yeah, app bundle support is only available by dynamic features. And yeah, if you do support library, if you're using library feature modules in your app, and then you decide to support dynamic feature modules, there is a chance you have to change your current project setup, whether it's to do with your dependency injection or whether it's to do with how things are launched and so on. There will be a lot of moving things around and a lot of tweaking things to get it right. It's not a case of just switching it to go. So before I finish, just wanted to touch on a couple of hurdles, or a couple of things that I experienced myself. Is only two things, but they're quite big things. First one is dependency injection. So I don't know if this is the same for every DI provider. So I don't know if it's the same for Coin. I don't know if it's the same for Kotlin, but Dagger, which is probably one of the most popular DI frameworks for Android. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is. So yeah, so the first 2 points are Dagger, as far as I know, and again, I'd love to know if someone's worked it out. Dagger Android is not compatible with dynamic feature modules. So a lot of applications will make use of Dagger Android, where you call Android injection.inject and then pass in the context or the activity and fragment. I think that's what it is. Then that is not usable in your dynamic feature modules, because for that, when you use that, your activity fragment or your graph depends on that application, the DI configuration in your application module. And that's fine if you're not using dynamic feature modules. If you're using library modules, then you can still get that to work somehow, maybe. But with these dynamic feature modules, you can't make use of dynamic Dagger Android. So just to be aware, and that was the biggest thing when we started moving stuff over. That was the biggest thing for us, the biggest change, because we had to do a lot of tweaking to get things working. And it's a shame, because Dagger Android it makes things a lot easier to use. But at the same time, like Dagger Android is a lot of magic behind the scenes. So having to set up your own components and injection graph is a good thing for having a better understanding of how things are working and how things are tied together in your code base. So briefly, how this looks is in our, say we had a composer feature module, we'd then have a core module and a core component defined within a core module. And this core module would extend the components and the modules that are defined within our base module, and then we can create our injection graph that way. And the same thing will happen within our base module. So in our app module, sorry, in our app module, we'll make use of these the same base module and the same base component as well. So because our feature modules and our app modules are making use of the same base module and base component, we can all tie into the same graph, and the injection can work successfully. So that's one way you can do it, and that's the way I got that was from Played, that's by Nick Butcher, and I think the Googler team are working on it now. It's definitely worth checking out if you're looking into working with app bundles, because they've got Dagger working in there, and this is a similar, if not the same, approach to what they're using there, and it works well. I haven't found any other way to do it just yet, but I'd love to hear if anyone has. I think it's still all a bit up in the air, but yeah. That was the first thing, and the second thing is testing. So no biggies here, really, no big problems. The only thing is running Espresso tests from Android Studio in dynamic feature modules does not work for me. I've tried looking into whether it's a configuration thing, so on. I think I've worked it out the other day. I haven't tried it yet, but running from Gradle works. So you basically can run the connected Android tests task from your Gradle command, and it will essentially do loads of magic behind the scenes. And what it does is it installs the split APKs, because when you run Espresso tests, you need the base APK installed. And if you're running a dynamic feature module test, then it doesn't have that base APK. So out of the box, running it from Android Studio does not work. So running it from the Gradle command, it will install the split APK, it will run your tests, and they'll pass. So what you could do is you could add that split APK install command to the config, the configuration in your Android Studio for your Espresso tests, and that should be able to work the same. And if you're using CI, then again, you'll have to update any Gradle commands for your tests in there to be able to do the same thing. And that's it. And on the subject of CI, that's the same thing for any of this. Like if you've got your CI set up completely to work with non-app bundles, and if you're going to switch to app bundles, there are a few things that change, like the Google Play app signing. You have to change that within your CI, because your CI is probably signing APKs. You have to change the distribution that uploads, and also how your tests are run. So there's a few things to think about, like before you try and go all in and jump to app bundles. It's good to do it step by step, like maybe start with the app signing and get that working, get that configured in a CI, get that fixed. Maybe get app bundles supported in your app, or maybe switch over to Dagger individual components first, and then work on app bundles. Like do it step by step and move things over individually, so you can have more of a grasp on what you're doing. And that's kind of it from me. There's a few links there. I know some of them are kind of long. I probably should have used a link shortener, but I figured, I kind of run out of time. So you can probably work on there and let me know if you go to my Medium page, it's pretty accessible from there anyway. But yeah, there's just a few links there. Bourbon's the first app that I mentioned. Again, code's really bad, but it provides a good example of a modularized application, an old style one. We've got clean architecture boilerplate for modularization by layers. Played is a great example of dynamic feature modules, and how they're using Dagger in that is also a really good example for anyone looking to switch. And then a couple of blog posts on modularizing Android apps, feature modularization, and app bundles as well, which I've written, which might be useful to you, which could be cool to check out. But that's it from my side. Cool. Switch over.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. A lot of interesting info. What I get from here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when we are creating a new project, we must decide first what the modules are going to represent, and then from that start building up. When would you go for one way or the other. I mean, you mentioned that you prefer the feature modularization, but it's not for every project. In which situations would you consider using another approach?
Yeah, I guess feature modularization is like, say if your app's got a lot of features, for example, like then it could be good there. But the modularizing by layer, your app could, it could be a really simple app with not many features, but there could be a lot of complex stuff under the hood in terms of like data that happening behind the scenes. So whilst it may look simple to a user, it might be 2 or 3 screens, but under the hood there could be a lot of complexity going on. And I think in those cases it could make more sense to modularize by layer, because then you're splitting out those things. I mean, don't get me wrong, like you could even mix the two. Like you could modularize by feature and then have those layer modules as well, like to separate things out if that's what you want to do. But that could add complexity. but yeah, I mean, I think each has its place. To be honest, I mean, only if you're starting a new app, it is hard sometimes to know exactly what things are going to look like along the line. But even starting off with, if you don't want to support app bundles up front, like starting off with library modules and stuff and features could be a good start, because at least if you are going to move along the line, then you're kind of set up to do so.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to go. So I have some questions from the chat. I'm moving back to take a look. There's one from, I'm sure I'm not going to say it correctly, but Kiet Nguyen or something like that. Sorry for my spelling. Any approach to use Dagger on dynamic feature module? That kind of the only issue with modularizing. I think that some of these you may have answered then during the talk. And this one specifically,
yeah,
you have something to add?
I think that yeah, kind of basically is still a bit loose. I work out how that works best is they define like a component and module in their base module, and then they have so in their core module they have a base component and a base module, and that base module is used by both the app module and the feature modules. So everything's using the same module, so things can tie in together, and that seems to work. The only thing that, because there's a lot of components defined, I mean, my only thought there was there could be a lot of boilerplate if you've got like a lot of injections taking place and a lot of components defined. But at the same time, I haven't found any other way for it to work right now. so I don't think there's too much risk. Like I said, it would be great if someone could find, or if there could be a way that Dagger Android could work, or maybe there's something that out in future that would make things a lot simpler. But I'm not sure if that would be possible.
Good. I hope it helps him. And then we have another one from Joachim Ley. I would like to know what are some the prep steps you would recommend to start migrating from a single module project. This is especially hard when we have the same models being used.
Yeah. So if you've got data models that are being used throughout the app, like that's one of the things we had. It was a really hard thing to do. It depends what approach you're taking. Like if you don't, one thing you could do is you could have different models and map between them. And that's one thing you could do. Like you could have one model representation in one module and another model representation in another module, and you could map between them. But that can get a bit tedious. And it depends what it is. So one other thing you could do is you could place that model inside of a core module, or keep it in the base module, and then have, for example, if you're having a dynamic feature module, that dynamic feature module would know about the app module, so it can still access the resources in there. But yeah, it could make sense to add a core module there, because then it saves you mapping things. Like I said, that can get a bit tedious, and also then that core module is accessible to both your base, your app module, and also your feature module.
Mm-hmm. And kind of related with this, he also asks, where does dependency injection live? You mentioned something about it, and I think it depends on the approach you take. But he asks if the main module have all the module components, or each module has their own DI setup. How So it should be done.
If it's like a feature module, then the feature should have the components and the modules defined inside of that module. If you're modularizing by layer, then the injection, the DI will be set up within the app module. Because you probably could put it in the say if you had like a remote and cache, you probably could put it in there, but I don't know how much sense that makes. It's probably personal preference, but I would probably just keep it inside the app module.
Yeah, from my experience, when you modularize by layer, it's kind of easier if everything is on the app module, because also you don't have to add that dependency to all modules, only to the app one. So things become a little easier.
Yeah, definitely.
A matter of taste too. And I think there was another one. Let me check. Tyler McGraw asks, how well do app bundles work with beta distribution platforms like Fabric Beta, Crashlytics, Instapack, Hockey App, etc.? Have you tried it?
Good question. I haven't tried it, but yeah, I'm not sure. So I know on iOS, again, it's a different platform, but I know iOS with Fabric, each thing comes up as a different package name. So say if you had a composer module on iOS, Fabric would label that as a different app. I don't know if it's the same on Android. That's something I probably have to check. I can see if it does do that, I can see pros and cons, but yeah, I'd probably have to check that and get back to you. But because essentially it is a different package name and stuff, so it could come under a different application. But I'll have to double check that.
And that brings me out another question. If you use the Google bundles and features, does that app can be released to another market, for instance, the Amazon one, or this is so tied to Google services that it's not possible?
The Google app bundle, like the dynamic delivery and stuff, that is tied to the Play Store, as far as I know. If I'm wrong there, then correct me, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I mean, you can still, so with the app bundles, there's a thing called a bundle tool, which is like a command line tool that lets you like build APKs and stuff. So if you're going to distribute to other stores, then in your CI or from your, if you release from your machine, you'd probably have to make use of the bundle tool to build an APK to be released to those stores. Yeah, because as far as I know, the app bundle is only a sort of a Play Store thing. But I guess that's another way. Maybe that's their way of tying you in.
Okay. No. Apart from that, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it, I think. Well, there's another one. Any tricks from Vladimir Jelakovic? Any tricks to detect changes in specific modules when building on CI and run slow integration tests, just for that module instead of all of them?
It depends what for, I guess. Like, so we use a tool called Danger. I've written a few blog posts on it that lets us like handle stuff to do like formatting and changed files. And in that, we do have checks that check if files have been changed. And we generate, like, using a script, we generate a file of changed files. We only use that for like test diffing, but depends what you want to use that for. You could do some diffing on changed files and then use that file to perform certain CI operations. Yeah, again, it depends what for.
Nice. So thank you. I think there are no more questions. Thank you so much for everything you told us today. It was great having you, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And that's it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been great chatting and great sharing some of my learnings. But yeah, happy to be here and appreciate you asking me.
Awesome. So for the ones that want to communicate with you or know a little more about you, what can we give them to go, or any blog sites or Twitter?
Yeah, to be honest, Twitter is probably my best. Twitter.com. Well, it's at hi there, Joe. if you're going to get that, probably best to put it in the description. But yeah, Twitter is the best place because if I write, I post it, I put everything on there. So and feel free to message me, DM me. Like I try and reply to everyone I can. So yeah, feel free to reach out if anyone's got any questions.
Nice.
Cool.
I was told that I missed one question from Brown. Suppose I split my project into features to access components from another module. One needs to implement that module in its Gradle. Imagine I have like 10 plus modules and all have to implement some modules. Would that increase the chance of getting multi-dex?
Oh, so they all have to implement the core module.
Sorry?
So is he saying that if you have 10 modules and they all implement the one core module, they all implement the same module, like as a dependency?
I think so, not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
the chance.
I'm not, yeah, that's not something I've looked into, to be honest. It'd be interesting to know, but our project's multi-dex anyway, so it just wouldn't have affected us. But I can look into that, and it would be interesting to know. I don't think it would, because your project is as a whole, and that module's already in the project. But as if you've already got 10 modules, if it's going to be distributed anyway, like those modules, that module will only be used once. Like if you're using a dynamic feature module, that dynamic feature is just being added to the app. So if that core module is already available, yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. There are many other little questions, but I think we can leave it here. And if they want, they can answer back to some of the Twitter publications and continue the chat from there.
Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect. So thanks everyone for being here, for the ones that attended live, and also for the ones that see it later on YouTube. And if you want to continue attending to these events, please go to Droidkast.LIVE and join there, and I'll send you notifications when a new event is published. So thanks again, Joe, for being here today, and see you soon.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks again. See you later.
See you.